Hi guys, it's Frankie from Frankie Tech. Good to see you guys again, and I'm here today to share my comparison between the OnePlus 8T and the Realme X7 Pro. And these phones are truly almost like brother phones given how much they have in common, but a few key differences which once we go through the list will prove to you guys that there clearly is a best choice between these two phones. Now, as you guys know, the OnePlus 8T was launched globally and is now available for around 599 euros or $749 US for the 12256 GB variant. The Realme X7 Pro is still waiting for its global release in Q4 of 2020, but it was available in China for launch already for a couple months at 2,300 RMB. And so what key specs do these phones have in common? Where are they different? And which is truly the best choice between these phones? Let's have a look. So first off, let's start with the things that are very similar between these devices. And the first one has got to be the dimensions. 8.4 versus 8.5 millimeters, 188 versus 184 grams. So these phones are almost identical in terms of their dimensions. Even the curves on these phones are practically the same. And this extends even to the backs where you have this kind of glossy back on both of these phones. Obviously a different look here, different kind of color. I love the green of the OnePlus, but the white version of the Realme X7 Pro is nice too. But look at these camera bumps, guys. Do they look familiar or what? You definitely see where OnePlus or Realme have gotten inspiration from. The entire BBK family of phones using a very similar rectangular camera cutout. And even the layouts of the buttons on these phones is very similar. Power buttons in nearly the exact same spot. Volume rockers as well. And both phones have the speaker, USB-C, and the SIM trays in the exact same spot. And in terms of bezels, nearly identical as well. The OnePlus 8Ts is maybe a little bit smaller, but it's really not much of a difference. And a nearly identical punch hole cutout and bezels on both of these phones. Displays. 6.55-inch AMOLED displays on both of these phones, and both of them have a 120Hz refresh rate, which I do consider kind of the ideal spec for displays in this year. And looking at the viewing angles of these phones, I think they've used a very similar panel in both the OnePlus 8T and the Realme X7 Pro. And that being the case, neither of these phones actually get plenty bright at their max brightness. I've noticed that these are nice panels, they are flat panels, but they're definitely not to the level of the panels we've seen on phones like the OnePlus 8 Pro or even the Mi 10 series. And finally, a few more key areas where these phones are exactly the same. Battery life, 4,500 milliamperes on both phones. Both of them support 65-watt charging, whether it's Warp Charge or Super Dart. Very similar comms across the board. Wi-Fi 6 capable, though the OnePlus 8T does have Bluetooth 5.1 versus 5.0. And a very similar optical fingerprint scanner experience. That is to say, one of the fastest in-display fingerprint scanners on any phone can be found on both this OnePlus 8T and this Realme X7 Pro. But now that we've talked about what is similar, let's talk about the specs that are different between these phones. So first off, in terms of design, we do see that the OnePlus 8T is using a metallic edge versus the plastic edge on the Realme X7 Pro. And let me tell you guys, that is probably the biggest difference in terms of just premium feel between these phones. It's definitely been one of the biggest complaints I've had about the Realme X7 Pro, and the OnePlus 8T definitely corrects it here. With this gorgeous matte aluminum edge, it just looks and feels so much better. And while these displays are nearly identical, you do have a very slightly smaller bottom chin here on the OnePlus 8T, and I would say the white point is perhaps a little bit better, maybe a tad warmer here on the OnePlus 8T versus the Realme X7 Pro. And talking about performance, this is probably the key area where the OnePlus 8T, you could say, has the advantage using the Snapdragon 865, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, and clearly you see the Antutu scores a big jump between the 8T and between the Realme X7 Pro. But you see it here, guys, the Dimensity 1000 Plus is no slouch. It's a great performing chipset, both using a 7nm process. And of course, we have OxygenOS 11 versus Realme UI version 1. And this is where I think the OnePlus 8T probably has the biggest advantage. Just the brand of OnePlus and the type of software that they're using here means that you're going to have the best that OnePlus has to offer in terms of the experience on this phone. Look, Realme UI is a solid software skin, and it takes a lot of cues, I feel, from OxygenOS, but I don't think it surpasses it yet. And in DRM info, this is clearly global versus China ROM based, but we see L1 versus L3 on these phones. For now, the OnePlus 8T does have this advantage versus the Realme X7 Pro China ROM version. And here's YouTube playback and the audio experience on both the OnePlus 8T and the Realme X7 Pro. Dual speakers on both of these phones. And what can I say? The audio experience is nearly identical on these phones. I may give the slightest of edges here to the OnePlus 8T, but the Realme X7 Pro still produces quality sound, both pretty much equal in terms of YouTube playback and 8 out of 10s in terms of audio speaker quality. And the last major spec difference between these phones is in the camera department, where we see a 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 main camera versus a 64 megapixel IMX686 on the Realme X7 Pro, with 16 versus 8 megapixel ultra wides, 5 versus 2 megapixel macro, and 2 megapixel depth sensors on board. 4K 60 FPS capable on both of these phones. And guys, if you would have told me that the affordable flagship Realme phone at the end of 2020 would have a better main camera than the affordable flagship OnePlus phone, I would not have believed you. This is, I think, the biggest failure of this OnePlus 8T. I don't know what OnePlus was thinking, not including a newer sensor in this phone. But the main camera performance, while good on some shots, can also be very underwhelming. And video also has struggled on this phone, with a lot of other reviewers, including myself, experiencing this type of judder that you see in video. I've tested this out myself, and I've definitely seen this type of judder happen as well. All in all, guys, the Realme X7 Pro is using year-older camera sensor technology versus the OnePlus 8T. And in my experience, the Realme X7 Pro really does take great photos with that IMX686 on board. And I think overall, for the price, delivers the more impressive set of cameras than this OnePlus 8T. And so that's it, guys, for this comparison. And now my final verdict: which is truly the best choice? Well, we haven't talked about the main spec, of course, and that is the price. And while the Realme X7 Pro is still only available for China release, I truly believe when this phone is launched in Europe, it's going to retail for at most 499 euros. They may even go lower in price point to 450. If they hit 399, that would be incredible. But basically, you're going to be able to pick up this Realme X7 Pro at a lower cost than the OnePlus 8T. Now, the key areas where the OnePlus 8T still has the advantage, I would say, is in build quality with the aluminum finish, performance with the Snapdragon 865, and in software, Oxygen OS is just clearly the better software experience in my opinion. The Realme X7 Pro matches or even surpasses this OnePlus 8T, with a very similar, gorgeous AMOLED 120Hz display, still great performance from the Dimensity 1000 Plus, the same battery life, and the same 65-watt super dart charging, great comms, great fingerprint scanner, great vibration motor, by the way. But in the one key area that I think for so many people matters the most, in cameras, I think the Realme X7 Pro actually edges out the OnePlus 8T. And so once you factor in the pricing and the fact that the OnePlus 8T has really underwhelmed in one of the key specs, the cameras, I'm going to say that the better choice between these two phones has got to be the Realme X7 Pro. And it is definitely the phone that I'm going to be keeping of these two for future comparisons and just for my own personal use. OnePlus 8T is a solid release, and I think OnePlus fans are definitely going to be happy, but I just find the camera performance and the general overall package just feels overpriced for what you are getting. And this will finally become even more clear once we get the European pricing and global pricing for this Realme X7 Pro. I think it's going to significantly undercut the OnePlus 8T and is going to be the better choice for most of you. But hit me up in the comments. OnePlus 8T or Realme X7 Pro? Which do you think is the better choice for you? Hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, give me that thumbs up. And if you love the content of Frankie Tech, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for future updates. And do let me know, guys, if you'd want to see any more comparisons between these phones. To be honest, I'm planning to get rid of the OnePlus 8T. I've been fairly underwhelmed by the experience of this phone, with Oxygen OS 11 being one of the few exceptions why I might want to keep it for a bit longer. But do let me know either way. So that's it. And this is where I leave you by saying, this is Frankie Tech signing off. Have a good one. Man, IMX586. OnePlus, what were you thinking?